You're listening to the Creatorpreneur Podcast, Episode 2, and today I'm sharing a simple way to believe in yourself to create the life and business you want. So stay tuned. Hello, my name is Rodney Washington, author, artist, and entrepreneur, and I'm passionate about helping creatives just like you do what lights you up and make a comfortable living while doing it. Each week, I'll be sharing timely business growth, marketing, and mindset hacks and interviews with courageous creative entrepreneurs to inspire you to get paid for your creativity. So grab your favorite beverage, sit back, and enjoy today's show. All right, welcome back to episode 2 of the Creatorpreneur Podcast, and I am back today with the topic today is believing in yourself to create the life and business that you want. Now, the reason why I'm going over this for the second episode is because everything that we create in our life is based on belief. We have to believe that what we want, or at least our attempt to go for what we want, is possible on some level. Otherwise, we really won't stay with it when the challenges come up and when the questions come up and we start to maybe doubt ourselves. Or what really gets us is when the people around us who are closest to us don't always share or are able to sustain the belief that we are trying to hold on to for ourselves. And of course, in our effort to never disappoint the people that we have in our lives, sometimes we will fault or default to that person basically not believing in us and even getting to the place where we will eventually fade out or stop going for what we want in our dream. What I want to share with you in this episode is how to build that momentum up for yourself now before you really get going, or even if you already currently have a business and you've been finding yourself not able to really stay with it consistently, or maybe you're just even burning out. You've been doing it for a while and you're not quite ready what the next thing is and you're not quite sure what it is. As I said on episode 1, it's not so much about focusing on the thing you sell as much is it about focusing on taking care of you, building you up, creating yourself as the entrepreneur. And of course, the foundation of creating yourself is believing in yourself. So if you don't believe in yourself or you can't sustain that belief, it's going to be very challenging. The road's going to get a lot harder. You have to believe in yourself when basically a lot of times no one else does. And unfortunately, that's kind of the way the world is for people that maybe you're surrounding yourself with, that they just don't get it. They don't get what you're doing. They may be asking you questions like, why don't you just go get a job or whatever? But if you really believe inside of yourself that you're built for something bigger, something different, then you're going to have to walk the journey yourself. And what I'm going to share with you as I go into what I have outlined for you today is sometimes even the people closest to us, the people that we live with, family or friends or what have you, they just don't get it. And you're going to have to be able to hold space for yourself to continue on your path, even if those around you don't get it. And what I have found in my experience is when you commit to yourself and what you want to create, the people around you watch you. They watch your actions and they see what you're doing. And I have found in my experience that sometimes those people that are closest to us, they start doing things themselves because they see what you're doing and they see what you're creating. And many times those folks will come on board because they see that you're committed to what you're doing. But again, all of this is rooted in believing in yourself. So that's why I feel like this was an important episode to share before we start getting into more sort of meat and potatoes kinds of things. As the episode goes on, I want to really focus on this now to sort of set the framework mindset-wise so that you will have the energy and the momentum to keep moving forward. So let's jump right into it. Now, for me, what I believe to create a dream life that you would really love to live is you need basically two things. You need a dream that you believe in, and you need a belief in yourself that you can achieve it. And that's really foundationally the main two things that you need. Now, let's start with number one, a dream that you can believe in. Everything that you have in your possession right now, if you take out the phone I'm assuming that you're listening to this podcast episode on, let's say, an iPhone, the mere fact that you're able to listen to this podcast on a digital device that is essentially a portable computer, and even the episode of this podcast that you're listening to, all of this started out as a dream or a vision in someone else's imagination. The people who designed the iPhone, this had to be a dream that they had. They didn't know how it was going to come together. Maybe didn't have any framework for it, but they just felt like this was something that was possible. So they had to believe in it, or at least dream it up in order to allow themselves to believe in it, in order to create it. As I mentioned on yesterday's, or the episode 1 of the podcast, I don't know when you're listening, so it may not be yesterday's. But anyway, on episode 1, I talk about how I've been thinking about relaunching or redoing this podcast for over 2 years. And as I was thinking about it, all the things that kept coming up to me as the topic and the title and the things I would cover and all of that. And I literally spent 2 years like sort of playing it around in my head about what it would look like and how it would sound and, everything about it. And it was something that I had to basically, even when I wasn't talking about it with anyone around me, it was still something that I was still dreaming about and imagining and trying to get clarity around. But it had to start with my imagination. It wouldn't exist. You wouldn't be listening to this right now if I didn't give myself the space to think about what this show could be. And I'm in the beginning stages, and, I plan to be doing this for quite some time. So it's going to evolve. It's going to grow. It's going to, morph into whatever the next iteration of it will be. But it had to start with that just literal sitting around thinking about, if I did another podcast, what would I do? How did I want it to be? And that's how it all starts. So again, you need a dream that you can believe in, and you need a belief in yourself that you can achieve it. So what I want to start with is the fundamental element of creation. And I believe that dreams drive creation. You have to have some kind of a dream, a vision in your mind that drives the creation to do the work. But to me, the creation is the work process, the process of putting it actually together, the researching it, the sourcing materials, or whatever it is that you're doing. And to really show how, or to emphasize how important dreams are to the creation process, is think about, I mentioned a moment ago about the device you're listening to this podcast on, but really think about it for a second. Every book that you read, every film that you go to, you watch, every piece of music that you listen to the plate of food that you enjoy at a restaurant or at home, the article of clothing that you wear, the car you drive, the home you live in, the vacations that you can take, the locate where you're going to go, even the job or career that you have, all started out as a dream at some point in the person who created its life. It all stems from that. So that's why I say dreams drive creation. And once we understand that and become intentional, then we can dream more with more purpose. And I feel that really is what really gets things going. It gets things happening when you can dream with purpose. Now, to help you with this process, I created a free downloadable worksheet that I'm going to share with you. And I'm going to be talking about this in this episode. It's a process I call Future Pacing Your Dream Life. And you can get that by going to my website at getpaidforyourcreativity.com/dream pacing. That's dream pacing. And you can also find that in the show notes for this episode at getpaidforyourcreativity.com/002 for episode 2. So anyway, let's get right into it. So the question you might have is, how do I create a dream that I can believe in? Because think about it. A lot of times, we're just basically just trying to get by and get through each day, hopefully with the least amount of drama that we can possibly have. And so sometimes, because we're living our life from that perspective, it's hard to dream, or you forget about what you dream about because it just seems so far out in the distance or not even possible. So sometimes we can go, why bother? But I want to, in this exercise here and what I'm going to share with you in the future pacing exercise, I want to help we awaken those dreams or even create new ones. So the first part of this is asking yourself or allowing yourself to pay attention. This is the basic kernel of creating a dream. It's paying attention to what speaks to you. I'll share this for myself and a little example for myself. When I was working, as I mentioned on episode 1, I was working for a .com company in the Bay Area in the early 2000s, and I was a junior web producer. And part of the clients that were filtered over to me were the photographers. Now, again, this was 2000, actually, the year 2000, 19 years ago, I can't believe. But anyway, I'm aging myself here. But my clients that were filtered over to me were photographers primarily. And literally, the photographer would send to us their physical portfolio. And then I had to go inside the portfolio, put on gloves so I wouldn't potentially damage the images, pull those images from the portfolio, scan them into the computer, and then color match them in Photoshop before I could build their web portfolio page on our platform. And so doing that, I was obviously able to see a lot of different photographers' work, and doing that inspired me. So about 5 years later, I actually picked up a camera and started taking pictures myself. It became a passion and an interest of mine. And I actually created a business, a photography business out of it. What happened was for me, and what really propelled me to start the business several years later, was I was in a job that, as I mentioned in the last episode, that I really did not like at all, couldn't wait to get out of. And I needed something to give me drive, something to motivate me. And for me, I felt, okay, I'm just going to get a camera and I'm just going to start taking pictures because I've always had an interest in photography and I really think that there's something to this. In the very, very beginning, I didn't necessarily know I would make it a business. Although in the back of my mind, I was hoping that that's what it could become, but I was willing to just start there. And my first camera that I purchased was actually a little pocket Canon A60 pocket digital camera. And that's what I used to start my photography business. And I actually created a show of my work that I got into a coffee shop. I'll talk about this in a future episode in more depth. But that was my first entry into photography. But it started with me giving myself something I could, that would speak to me. And to me, photography spoke to me. It gave me an outlet. So I started there. And so what I'm saying, and what made it really solidify for me in that moment was because I didn't know how to start a business doing that. I just said, okay, I'm interested enough in this and I'm willing to do this in this particular stage of my life, which was like in around 2005, 2006, even if I'm not getting paid for it. I'm willing to do this because this is sparking interest in me. And so I went with that. And that's what I say to you is that maybe in the very beginning, you may not get paid for the thing that you do. But if it holds your interest and pulls up your passion and you can get really engaged with it, that's the first best place to start. And then the way to make it a business will come a little bit later. And that's what essentially happened with me. So the question I ask is, what is it that you are willing to do to express your creativity, whether you're getting paid for it or not? The way, if a business is to be made of it, you'll find the way because there's a myriad of ways to make it a business. But you have to start with the thing that most speaks to you and calls to you. And in a future episode of the podcast, I'm going to go into turning your idea, your spark, your vision into what I call a passion-based business plan. And we'll look at models and that kind of thing. So that's coming up in a future episode. So keep your eye out for that. But today we're going to start talking about how to get the wheels turning and about the activities that bring you joy, something that you can conceivably make money doing down the line. But the main focus of this exercise is designed to first help you recognize what you enjoy. Now, once you uncover what that is, I want to encourage you to really play here. Just go with me for a minute on this and fantasize for a bit on what your life would look like if you could spend your days doing only the thing that you loved. So when I was first getting started with the camera, I would literally go out and take photographs and then print them out so I could see them. And one of the first visions that came to me was, if I was able to do this full time, is I thought, well, I would have a show. Subsequently, that ended up happening faster than I thought it would. And it happened as a result of me being actually very naive about what I was doing. But I walked into a local coffee shop because I was noticing the artwork on the walls in this coffee shop I was at. And I asked the manager, how could someone do this? And I was speaking with the manager, and they told me to bring in a book and they would consider giving me a slot. I didn't have a book. I just went to a local store where I could buy like a portfolio sleeve to put in photographs. And I printed out, I think, about 30 of the best ones I felt I had. And I walked in with the book and I showed them to her, and I ended up with a show that lasted a month. So it happened very organically, but it started with me imagining if I was going to turn this into a business, so to speak, what would that look like? And my thought was, well, maybe it would be a show. That wasn't the ultimate business model I stayed with, but that's was what I started with. So once you uncover what that is, I want to encourage you to fantasize about that and what your life would look like or feel like if you could spend your days doing only that. Now, I talked about myself as a photographer. I want to use for an example here. Let's say you love scuba diving. I'm just going to put out as an example here. So let's say that you love scuba diving. You can fill this in with whatever your particular passion or interest is. So ask yourself, what places would you go to scuba dive? What locations actually appeal to you, interest you? How much of the day would you spend scuba diving? Who would you scuba dive with? And if you were going to attempt to make a living at scuba diving, these are what are some of the things that you could do? Perhaps you could write books on scuba diving, or you could open up a diving school or become a certified diving instructor and teach scuba diving. You could organize trips and take people on scuba diving expeditions. You could also consider starting a podcast on scuba diving. You could also create an authority blog or a YouTube channel on scuba diving. And on either of those mediums, you could sell affiliate products. Meaning scuba diving gear, scuba diving trips that other people have created. There's a million different ways that you could use without you actually teaching diving or being a diver yourself, although I would think you'd want to dive yourself. But you can find out what the needs of divers are and then create a platform for yourself where you can offer affiliate products and make money that way. So I don't want to go down this road too much, but I just want to get your mind thinking of some ways that you could attempt to make a living, or at least daydream about how you can make a living from your particular topic. Again, fill this in with whatever speaks directly to you. Now, again, I want you to take some time and daydream about it. And I want you to, this is the cornerstone of the future pacing exercise I want to share with you here. And again, you can download that worksheet and work it as I'm going through this at, again, getpayforyourcreativity.com/future pacing. Dream pacing. Okay. So I said, take some time to daydream about it. And I'd like you to imagine that 5 years has passed and you've given yourself permission to be and do and have all that you want as it relates to this particular area of your life. Imagine that you've taken all the appropriate steps, and as a result of all the consistent action you've taken, you're now living your dream. Perhaps you made a decision that you wanted to live in the Caribbean. You've gone to the Caribbean to dive yourself. You love it there. You think it's the best place in the world, and it's motivated you so much that you actually have now moved there. You decided that your business idea, your business model is to open up a scuba diving school. So now you have that school, and you're spending your days taking out enthusiastic divers out into the beautiful blue-green waters, introducing them to the colorful world under the sea. Your business is thriving, you're thriving personally, and you're living your dream. And from this current reality, how do you feel about your life? Okay. And make up a fantasy about this. I think a lot of times as we get older, we think, oh, it's silly or foolish or useless or whatever to daydream. I think that daydreaming is one of the most mentally freeing thing that you can do, especially if your reality is not anywhere close to where you want to be. I think daydreaming actually saves our sanity in a lot of ways. So I want to give you, and I want to encourage you to give yourself that right now. Okay. So as I ask the question, I'll ask it again. Assuming everything has worked in your favor, 5 years has passed, and it's gone even beyond your wildest dreams, how do you feel about your life? Make up a fantasy about it. Now, these are the real important questions as it relates to the future pacing exercise that I am going over with you here in this episode. I want to ask you these questions, or you ask these questions of yourself from this place. What did you learn about yourself? Because again, a lot of times we focus on getting to what we want or having what we want, but we don't think about what it takes to get there. And what I want you to do is to imagine that you have it and you're living your dream life, and then ask yourself, what did you have to learn about yourself to get that dream? Maybe you had to learn how to dream bigger. Maybe you had to learn how to research. Maybe you had to learn how to, let's say in this context, you had to learn how to dive. You had to become certified. And then all of the things that you learn about that process. You had to learn how to teach and become a good diving instructor. You had to learn about the waters and the temperature and the time of day. And if you started a scuba diving school, you had to learn about the customers and how to get them and how to set up the tours and how to take them out and how to make sure everyone is safe and how to make an experience so that the people that you took out on the diving expeditions would tell other people about it. You had to learn how to run your school. You had to learn how to, I can just run down the list, but these are some of the things that you could future pace and ask yourself, what did you have to learn about yourself? And what I would like to think, the number one thing that you would want to walk away from that you can say you now know about yourself is that you followed your intuition and that you trust yourself to go for what you want. You believe in yourself. And that's the crux of what this exercise and what this podcast episode is about. You had to believe in yourself to see that this dream became a reality. Because if you're doubting yourself every step of the way, any roadblocks that get in the way of you getting that will stunt you and you'll eventually stop. So what I want to encourage you to do is what I'd like to hear you say that you learn about yourself is that you believe enough in yourself to stay with it. And that's the big lesson out of it. Now, in terms of the structure of the business, ask yourself, what did you discover about your target audience? Using this particular example, maybe you thought that your clientele was going to be a certain gender or a certain marital status or whatever the case may be, but what you uncovered was very different than what you initially thought it was going to be. So what did you learn about your target audience? What did you learn about what they liked, what they don't like, where they want to go? Maybe you thought it was going to be one location. It turns out to be something else. Maybe you thought it was going to be daytime dives and it was nighttime dives. And then I want to ask you, or ask yourself this question, what has going for your dream taught you? This is really important because, again, we can get focused on getting the thing that we want, but we don't realize that the real gift in all of this is the journey and the process to getting it. That's where the real gifts come into play. So what has going for this dream taught you? And this is another real key one. What would you tell someone looking to follow in your footsteps? So imagine that you've achieved everything that you envisioned, and now someone has approached you and said, hey, I've been watching you, or I just experienced one of your trips or whatever, and I'm really I want to do this myself. How can I follow in your footsteps? So imagine what you would tell them, and literally give yourself the opportunity to ask these questions, but from a place of dreaming what you would say. Just pretend. So again, I want you to play in this space for a while and don't rush it because this exercise is the epitome of future pacing. You see, when you can pretend, that you have something in your life, your subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between fantasy and reality. The more that you can make it feel real, like it actually is in existence, the better it goes for you. Because what happens is the subconscious starts to look for circumstances and opportunities and situations that support what it believes of as fact. Okay, I'll say that again. When your subconscious goes to work on something, it's looking for an outside confirmation that what you're dreaming about, what you're believing, is fact. And the perfect example of this is, imagine that you have been eyeing a particular car. You want a brand new car, and you decide to maybe go to look on a website to look at the new car that you want to get. And you decide to go to the lot where the cars are sold and get set inside of one and test drive one, and you're reading all the magazines about the cars and you're studying them and all of this stuff. And then as soon as you've made that tactile experience with that thing that you envision yourself with this car, you start noticing on the road that car. It may not be the color, but it could be the make, the model, and all of that. Now, the car was already there. It was always there. It's just that you hadn't done anything externally to connect to that in order for it to become an experience for you. And now your brain has been rewired to start paying attention to it. So everywhere you go, you'll notice the particular car that you've been eyeing. The same thing happens with your dream. You may decide in this context that you want to explore your passion for scuba diving. So the next time you go to a bookstore, you happen to notice scuba diving magazines. Maybe I'm sure those magazines were always there. You just never paid attention to them. And then you start noticing things on social media around the topic of scuba diving. And maybe someone that you know or know indirectly will say, hey, a friend of mine's going on a scuba diving trip. They've always been talking about this to Australia or whatever. When you're flicking channels on TV, you'll happen to wander upon the travel channel, which you may bypass most of the time. But this particular episode's on scuba diving. That's how it works. Once you get that thing connected in your brain, that this is something to pay attention to, your brain starts looking for confirmation. And from there, all the seeds of what you need to create what you want to create starts to reveal itself to you. So a question to ask yourself is, well, that's not so much a question, but it's a reality, is start noticing what you notice. Once you start to plug into that dream for yourself, start noticing what you notice. And another part of this, which I think is really important, is if you're having a difficult time trying to get to a place of dreaming or visioning something bigger for yourself, because maybe, you may be at a place in your life where it's just hard for you to really connect to that. Another way to find out what you're passionate about is ask yourself what irritates you. What's something that just kind of annoys you? Because a lot of times opportunities come through the things that are challenging for us. So maybe ask yourself that question. If you can't find something that necessarily lights you up to say, oh, I really want to do a business with that, maybe think about the things that challenge you. And those things could be the seeds or the kernel of what you could create your passion around. One thing that's really interesting is that millions and billions are made as a result of solving challenges or problems. And things that we look at or dismiss as, well, everyone knows this and this isn't anything new. But, if you really, let me back it up this way. If you look at infomercials at all, we see inventions all the time for gadgets that we never even considered, especially things around kitchen items like flipping hamburgers. Or I remember seeing an infomercial about a way to bake brownies that were already sectioned, so you didn't have to cut them or whatever, blah, blah, blah. It was it was interesting, but it was I look at these infomercials and I think someone had to think of that. Someone had maybe baked a pan of brownies and said, I don't like the way that I'm cutting these things. They're always coming out uneven. They're sticking together and whatever. And I'm just going to create something to keep them separated when they bake so that they come out neat and even and all the same size. It was something that just made them curious or frustrated them. They did something with it, and now they have an info commercial selling these brownie separators, for lack of a better way of saying it. So anyway, what I want to go into is, which is really key, is once you've given yourself the space to dream and to believe that what you're thinking about is possible, you've taken some action in the direction of where you want to go. I want you to keep this in mind. You don't have to know how you're going to do this at this point. This is where a lot of people get stumped. They think they've got to have it all figured out before they act. If you listen to episode 1, I talk about this. It is not at all about having it all figured out before you move. You take action on what you know. It can be as simple as someone pops into your head that you haven't spoken with in a long time, and you reach out to them or you hear from them and they have some information to share with you that takes you a step further. Maybe it's listening to this podcast or someone else's podcast, or it's going to a class or a YouTube channel that you run across, or a book or a magazine or whatever, or a TV show that you see. Again, as I said a moment ago, once you get that part of your brain activated, your brain starts looking for steps that you can take to move you in that direction. Call this person, email that person, you go to this place, turn on this channel, listen to this podcast, watch this YouTube video, whatever. And those things are the steps that you take that lead you to the next step and the next step and the next step. Now, I want to encourage you to actually do things like and what I want to encourage you to do is to be intentional. Like, just don't wait for the stuff to fall in your lap, so to speak, but be intentional. And of course, the best place to go to if you're trying to find out information about something or the topic that you have an interest in is go to Google. That's the best place to go and type in the type of business or idea that you're thinking about pursuing. And let's say for the purpose of this exercise, I actually did a test on this as I was creating this episode, I wrote in how to scuba dive full time. I actually typed those words into the Google search, how to scuba dive full time. And I got all kinds of ideas on that basically jump-started my thinking. Now you can do the same thing with YouTube, which by the way is owned by Google, and all sorts of videos came up. Now, in my experience, once you start discovering how other people are doing something you're thinking about doing, it starts to make it more possible for you. So if you want to take this to a deeper level, another action you could take to assist you in believing in yourself and your dream is to connect with someone currently doing what you want to do. We're living at a time now where it's never been easier to connect with someone. Social media, if for nothing else, has made it instantaneous for us to connect with someone that we want to connect with. Whether it's Instagram, Facebook, it doesn't really matter. You can direct message anyone and ask them a question. So one of the things that I was looking at during the exercise I'm doing for this particular episode was I did the search inside of YouTube. I found videos, and I noticed on the about pages, because each video channel on YouTube, the creator of that channel has an about page. So if you go to someone's YouTube page, you'll see an about link. You'll click on that, and many of them will have a way to email them. When I first started getting interested in photography, I used to go to people's websites and email them and ask if I could ask them a few questions about how to start a photography business. Not everyone took me up on my request, but I was willing to go out and do that. So I would suggest whatever, platform you're on, either direct message them or go through, like I said, their YouTube channel or their website, and most of them will have some kind of way to email them. Reach out and ask if you could talk to them for a few minutes. You'd be surprised. Many people will talk to you. But getting that information in will help to continue to motivate you to keep going for what your dream is. And doing those steps will help build up the belief that you can actually have it. Another option is to go to Amazon, look up books, again, or magazines. Usually there's some kind of a credit somewhere inside the article of this person where you can find their website or at least their social media platform. And again, if you, let's say you find an article on how this person started a scuba diving business, you really connected with that, using that as an example. You go to that person's social media because they listed in the article in the credits, you DM them, direct message is what I mean by DM, and you say, hey, I would love to chat with you for a few minutes. I read your article in such and such magazine. It really inspired me. I'm thinking about doing something similar. I would love to chat with you for a few minutes. Would that be possible? If you're respectful, people will take you up on it. Not everyone, but some. Okay? So I say all of this to say, to wrap this up, is that successful entrepreneurs, whatever they are wanting to do, they really expect on some level to be successful. They may have their moments and their doubts like everyone else does, but generally speaking, they expect to be successful. And they don't look at their current conditions or set of circumstances as they are, but as they wish them to be. And most importantly, they don't give up until their outer experience mirrors their inner experience. So on the second part of this worksheet that I invited you to download here, I want to invite you to write out what your dream life would look like if you don't give yourself permission to take action on your dream. How would you feel about your life then? Because sometimes we're not so much motivated by what we're going toward as much as we're trying to move away from. Now, I'm not a particular fan of that energy because I feel like that if you are working from away from energy, that can have the connotation of a possible threat of some sort, meaning you might lose something if you go for this. And so if you are operating from that place, the away from energy can start to dissipate once the implied threat is diminished. I'd rather you work from the place of going for something as opposed to away from something, if you can do that. So again, just keeping it really simple, if we asked the question earlier a moment ago, is what would your life look like if you went for it, and what would it look like? Now I want you to ask yourself the question, what would your life look like if you don't do it? If you doubt yourself, if you don't take action, if you don't reach out, if you just don't bother because you feel like it's too much work, it's too much money, I don't have the resources, I'm not this or that, or whatever the case may be. And a pretty good predictor can be that your life will look the way it looks the same now 5 years from now. Remember, in the future pacing exercise, we're looking at 5 years ahead of time. So assuming those same 5 years passed and you do nothing, what does your life look like? And the question to ask yourself is, if you do nothing for the next 5 years, can you live with that? Because that's ultimately what it comes down to. Either you go for what you want, you go for your vision, you go for your dream, or you don't. And either way it goes, assuming that you don't transition, meaning you leave this world in physical form, the time is going to pass anyway. The 5 years is going to pass anyway. So it would make more sense to me is that you would do the thing that lights you up and you go for it fully, as opposed to choosing not to go for it and then look up 5 years later and go, wow, I wished I had done something towards this vision. So it's a really important thing to look at. And that's what I think the power in future pacing is. You give yourself as big of a vision as you can, and you see what steps reveal itself to you, and you take action on those things or not. And if the latter is true for you, then ask yourself a very simple question. Can you live with that choice? If you can't, then this is the opportunity for you to make a different choice now. Now, to sort of conclude this whole process, sometimes we will not allow ourselves to go for something that we want. I mentioned this a little earlier in the episode because of the people around us. People we live with, family, so on and so forth. They're naysayers. They don't believe in what we're doing. They think that we're whatever, fill in the blank. And that will sometimes stop us or slow us down. When we're afraid of their ridicule, their judgment. But I find that more often than not, although there's real circumstances where someone may not like what we do or not approve of what we're doing and actually give us grief for it. But I find more often than not, other than outside people not giving us, not believing in us, is a lot of times we don't give ourselves permission, or we're waiting for external permission before we do something. That I see that more happening than not. And if that's what you're struggling with, I just want to say it really clearly now is stop waiting for permission, because as I said in, episode 1 of the podcast, permission is something that you don't have to wait for when you decide to walk this path, when you decide to create yourself as an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs don't wait for permission. They don't build their business based on permission to do what they need to do or what they want to do. They create something, they put it out there, and they get feedback and respond in kind, but they're not waiting for someone to tell them that it's okay for them to do or be or have what it is that they want. So what I'm going to say to you is, my hope and my vision for you is whatever you decide, I respect. But I would say if you really want to escalate your belief in yourself, daydream about what that is. Future pace it by believing that 5 years has passed and you went for it 150%, and now you're living that dream. Get clear about the details about what happened, what you're doing, what you had to overcome, who is around you, how are they responding to all of that, and really get clear in that, and then start looking for every opportunity to take some action on that vision. If you're in the second camp where you don't take action, or you're not feeling motivated to take action, ask yourself, why are you not motivated to take action? If it's because of some external person around you that you think is not going to support you, even if you don't get the quote unquote permission or blessing, but if you really feel on some level, some twinge inside of you that this is something that really has meaning and importance to you, I encourage you to go for it. At least start taking the baby steps to go for it. Because what I have seen in my own life is when you give yourself permission to do what you want to do, you open up the door for other people around you to do the same. They don't want to be left out. Even if they're not joining your business, but they go out and they pursue their own interest. And I think that that's where the real power in this comes from. Of course, I'm completely coming from the place of respecting the household. So if, what you're trying to put together is involving household funds, money, that kind of thing, of course, you need to have a discussion with your partner, whomever you're living with, as it relates to that. So, because you do need their buy-in. If you're going to be using part of your monthly income to be able to fund this, you do need to get some support from them. But again, don't let that stop you if you don't get it. You'll find another way. But again, don't hold yourself back because you're waiting for someone to say it's okay for you to do it. You're the only one that can give yourself that permission, and do what you need to do. Because again, the world needs what you're creating, what you want to create, what you want to put out in the world. And it only will happen if you move forward. And you only can do that if you're willing to at least have a kernel of belief in yourself. And not just the business, but the life that you want to have that goes with it. Because this is about all of you, not just what you do to make money and then you over here in the corner somewhere burned out and worked to death. It's about having a balance between your life and how you want to live and the thing that you do. Okay? At the end of the day, we're all given the same 24 hours. Every single one of us, no matter if we have no money or we're Rockefeller, we all have the same 24 hours. It's not the amount of time. It's what we do with that 24 hours that sets us apart. And if you're willing to take action and say yes, even imperfect action counts. And whether something is perfect or not perfect is all your perspective. What you might deem of as imperfect, someone else, they don't see it as imperfect. So get really clear about that. It's about taking action. We always want to get better, but we don't have to keep ourselves on hold or hiatus because we can't do it perfectly. Because to me, being imperfect and taking imperfect action is a hell of a lot better than spending night after night watching TV until bedtime. It ultimately comes down to aliveness or sameness. The choice is yours. What do you choose? Alrighty, I want to thank you for listening to episode 2 of the Creativepreneur Podcast. Episode 3 is also queued up and ready for you to listen to, and that is going to be my 5 top recommendations or ways to monetize your gifts, taken from the 57 ways to monetize your gifts free audio book that I have available for you, which you can go pick up at getpaidforyourcreativity.com/57 ways gift. So in episode 3, we're going to be talking about my top 5 out of the 57 that I share in that book. I invite you to go over there and grab that now. And until next time, I'll see you on the next episode. We have entered the age of creative self-employment. In the new economy, people are creating true security for themselves. That's why I believe there's never been a better time in history to monetize your gifts. So if you're ready to take control of your financial and creative future, I have something for you. It's my free audio and PDF program, 57 Ways to Monetize Your Gifts and Create True Security for Yourself. And you can get that at my website, getpaidforyourcreativity.com/57 ways gift.